Hello, I'm Harrison Carter, 38 years old, a civil engineer living in Chicago, Illinois. If you've ever been here, you'd know that wind in Chicago isn't just weather. It's a part of life, whistling through streets, cutting into coats, and sometimes even into the spirit. I live in a small apartment on the fourth floor of an old building where the windows overlook avenues glowing with the hazy light of street lamps under the breeze. I'm not the kind of person who talks much about themselves. Honestly, I'd rather spend all day calculating the load for a bridge than discuss what's going on in my mind. But if I must, I want you to understand that my life, like a structure, is built on sturdy concrete pillars. Yet, it's not without cracks that only I know about. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, in a brownstone house with a wrought iron fence where everything had to be perfect, at least on the surface. My parents, Robert and Margaret Carter, were the embodiment of that perfection. My father, a retired accountant, always wore a pristine suit, even if he was just going to the grocery store for a loaf of bread. He had a habit of straightening his tie whenever he was stressed, as if it were his way of keeping everything under control. My mother, an elementary school teacher, had a perfect smile in every family photo, but behind that smile were unwavering rules. Family honor comes first, she'd often say, her voice soft, but sharp as a blade. Never give the neighbors a reason to gossip. My younger sister, Sophia, and I grew up under those rules, but we were as different as day and night. I was the rock, steady, quiet, always doing what was expected. I excelled in school, graduated with a degree in engineering from Columbia University, and moved to Chicago to work for a construction company. My job is to build bridges, sturdy structures that connect two riverbanks. And I love the feeling of controlling numbers and blueprints. My life, at least in my eyes, is like a technical drawing. Clear, planned, with no room for deviation. Sophia, on the other hand, was a flame. At 32, my sister was once a passionate journalist, always chasing big stories. Sophia had eyes that sparkled as if they could light up a room and a way of speaking that made you feel like you were living in a novel. I still remember when she told us about her first investigative piece about a forgotten fishing community on the New York coast. She sat at our parents' dining table, her hands gesturing animatedly, her voice brimming with excitement, while my father just shook his head and said, "That girl, always dreaming." But I saw the light in Sophia's eyes, and I was proud, even if I never said it out loud. Then Sophia met Nathan Ellis. That man swept into her life like a gust of wind with a confident smile and sweet promises. Nathan, the creative director of an advertising firm in New York City, had the air of someone who always knew what he wanted. He wore impeccably tailored suits, drove a sleek Mercedes, and spoke in a way that made you think he could sell the sun itself. I didn't like Nathan much. There was something about him that felt insincere, but Sophia was different. She loved him so much she forgot the rest of the world. They married after a year of dating, and soon after Sophia gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Olivia. I still remember the day my nieces were born. I drove from Chicago to the hospital in New York City, clutching a bouquet of daisies, Sophia's favorite flower since childhood. When I walked into the room, Sophia was lying in bed, her hair damp with sweat, but her eyes shining brightly. She cradled two tiny red-faced baby girls in her arms. "Harrison, look," she whispered, her voice choked with happiness. "Emma and Olivia. They're my whole world." I stood there silent, feeling my heart soften. I'm not good at showing emotions, but in that moment, I just wanted to hug my sister and tell her she'd done the most incredible thing. I thought everything would be fine. Sophia had Nathan, her two daughters, and I believed she'd have a happy life. I returned to Chicago, went back to my work, and continued my life with Lauren, my wife. Lauren is a legal specialist, intelligent, sharp, with a smile that could melt away all my stress after a long day. We've been married for 5 years, and though we don't have children yet, we had plans, a bigger house, a vacation in Florida, and maybe one day the sound of children's laughter in our home. But life, as I've come to realize, never follows the blueprint. Everything fell apart on a windy night in Chicago. I was sitting in my apartment listening to the wind howling against the windows, holding a cup of cold coffee. My phone rang, and I saw Sophia's name on the screen. I frowned. She rarely called this late. Harrison. Her voice trembled over the phone as if she were holding back tears. Nathan. He's been cheating. He wants a divorce. I sat up straight, nearly dropping the coffee mug. What happened? Where are you? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but my mind was already in chaos. Sophia took a deep breath and said, her voice breaking, I'm at Mom and Dad's, but they won't let me in. I thought I'd misheard. Won't let you in. What do you mean? I asked again. My voice louder than intended. Sophia repeated, each word cutting into my heart like a knife. They said I'm a disgrace. They kicked me out. Wouldn't let me in the house. I'm standing in the wind with Emma and Olivia. I don't know what to do. Harrison, please help me. Her voice broke and I heard the faint cry of a child through the phone. I didn't think twice. Wait for me, I said, my voice firm. I'm coming. I grabbed my car keys, my jacket, and rushed out the door. Wind whipped at my face as I ran down the stairs and jumped into my old pickup truck. The drive from Chicago to New York City takes over 12 hours. But that night it felt like a lifetime. The wind blew relentlessly. The headlights dim in the gusts. But I didn't care. All I could think of was Sophia, my sister, standing shivering in the wind with her 2 little girls. I thought of our parents, of the heavy oak door of their New York City house where we grew up. How could they do this? How could they turn their backs on their daughter, on their 2 young granddaughters? Just because they were afraid of what the neighbors might say, I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to suppress the anger rising in my chest. I didn't want to think about our parents right now. I just wanted to get to Sophia. When I reached the familiar suburban neighborhood, the wind was still howling, as if it meant to shake the world. Our parents' brownstone house appeared under the streetlights, its wrought iron fence battered. I saw Sophia immediately. She was huddled under the porch, clutching Emma and Olivia, the 2 girls wrapped in blankets asleep on her shoulders. Sophia's blonde hair was plastered to her face, her thin jacket not enough to shield her or the girls from the biting wind. I stopped the car, opened the door, and ran to her. Sophia, I called, my voice from the wind. She looked up, her eyes red but tearless. Maybe she'd already cried herself dry. Harrison, she whispered, her voice frail. I don't know what to do anymore. I knelt in front of her, pulled the blankets tighter around Emma and Olivia, and took my sister's hand. Come on, I said. I'm taking you home. I don't know where I found that calm, but I knew this wasn't the time to be weak. I helped Sophia stand, took the girls in my arms, and led her to the truck. When I opened the back door and placed Emma and Olivia in the car seats I'd bought for the future, a sharp pain stabbed at my heart. This wasn't the future I'd imagined, but it was reality, and I had to face it, in the truck. I turned on the heater and asked Sophia if she was okay, but she didn't say anything, just stared out the window, her hands clenched tightly. I wanted to ask her everything about Nathan, about what had happened, but I knew now wasn't the time. Instead, I played an old Fleetwood Mac song, Landslide, because I remembered Sophia used to love it. The soft music filled the space, and I saw her shoulders relax slightly. On the drive back to Chicago, the wind didn't let up. I glanced at Sophia, saw her clutching an old blanket I kept in the back seat. Her eyes closed, but not asleep. Emma and Olivia stirred occasionally, but they were too young to understand what was happening. I wondered what Nathan had done to reduce Sophia to this state. That man with his smug smile and empty promises had destroyed my sister's family. And our parents, the people I once thought would always protect us, had cast her out into the street. I didn't know who I was angrier at. When we reached my apartment, it was nearly dawn. The faint light of sunrise broke through the wind, illuminating Chicago's glistening streets. I led Sophia and the girls up to my apartment and settled them in the living room. I pulled out an old crib, lined it with blankets, and placed Emma and Olivia inside. Sophia sat on the sofa, staring at her daughters with empty eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, but her voice lacked life. "Go to sleep," I said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Everything will be okay." But as I said those words, I knew they weren't entirely true. Things wouldn't be easy. Not now. But I also knew that no matter what happened, I wouldn't let Sophia face this alone. Never. The first few days with Sophia and the two baby girls staying at my apartment felt like an endurance test I was never prepared for. My small apartment, which had barely been enough for Lauren and me, was now cramped with the sounds of crying babies, bottles, and stacks of diaper bags piled in the corner. I didn't complain. Honestly, I'm not the type to whine, but I couldn't deny that my life had been turned upside down. I woke up earlier, brewed coffee, reviewed technical drawings, then hurriedly changed Emma or Olivia's diaper while Sophia was still lost in her exhaustion. She barely left the sofa, clinging to her two girls, her gaze vacant as if searching for a piece of herself that was gone. Lauren, my wife, was patient at first. She helped me prepare breakfast, warmed bottles for the babies, and even sat with Sophia trying to pull her out of her silent shell. Lauren was always good at keeping things balanced. That's why I loved her. She could juggle complex legal contracts at work and still come home with a bright smile. But I started noticing small signs. The way she sighed when Olivia cried in the middle of the night. The look she gave me when I spent the evening soothing Emma to sleep. Or the way she quietly moved her belongings to a corner to make room for Sophia's things. "Are you tired?" Lauren asked me one evening as we sat in the kitchen after a long day. She was holding a glass of wine, her eyes weary, but her voice still gentle. I looked at her, searching for an honest answer. "Yes," I admitted, rubbing my forehead. "But Sophia needs me. She has no one else." Lauren nodded, but I saw the corner of her mouth tighten slightly. "I understand," she said, but there was a distance in her voice as if she were trying to convince herself. Over the following weeks, a new rhythm began to take shape. Though it was far from easy, I went to work each day inspecting bridge construction sites on the outskirts of Chicago, where concrete pillars and steel cables gave me a sense of control I no longer found at home. Sophia started opening up, even if just a little. She told me about Nathan, about the signs she'd ignored, the late nights he came home, the messages he hid, and finally his cold confession that he had fallen for someone else, a younger, more interesting colleague. I listened, feeling my blood boil, but I held it in, nodding and squeezing her hand. "You'll get through this," I said, though I wasn't sure how easy that would be. Emma and Olivia, though only 6 months old, were the only light in those gloomy days. I never expected I could love two little girls so much. Every morning when I picked up Olivia and saw her smile, her big round eyes looking at me like I was her whole world, I felt a strange strength. Emma was different. She was fussier, but every time she gripped my finger, I felt like I could do anything to protect them. I got used to waking up at 4:00 in the morning to make bottles or carrying a diaper bag whenever I went out. I even learned to sing lullabies. Though honestly, my voice was so bad that Sophia burst out laughing when she heard me sing Twinkle, twinkle, little star to Olivia, but not everything was smooth. Lauren started to change. The evenings she used to spend with Sophia and me, chatting about small things, turned into moments of silence. She often stayed late at the office or retreated to the bedroom early, claiming she needed to rest. I noticed her growing distant, but I didn't know what to do. Every time I tried to talk, Lauren would give a faint smile and say, "I'm fine, Harrison. You focus on taking care of Sophia and the girls." One evening, after Sophia had gone to bed and the girls were asleep, Lauren pulled me out to the small balcony of our apartment. The wind had stopped, but the air was still damp and cold. She crossed her arms, staring out at the street, shimmering with streetlights. "Do you ever think about us?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. I was taken aback, unsure where this was coming from. "What do you mean?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Lauren turned to face me, her eyes glinting with frustration. "I mean our life, Harrison, before Sophia and the girls came. We had plans, a bigger house, a vacation, a family of our own. What about now you spend all day taking care of your sister and your nieces? And I—" She paused, taking a deep breath. "I feel like I'm on the sidelines." I wanted to say something, but my throat tightened. I knew she was right. I'd let Sophia and the girls consume all my time and energy, but I couldn't turn my back on my sister, not after what she'd been through. "Lauren," I said, placing a hand on her shoulder, but she gently brushed it off. "You don't get it," she interrupted. "I'm not selfish. I know Sophia needs you, but I need you too. We're married, Harrison." The conversation ended in silence. Lauren walked back inside, closing the door behind her, leaving me alone on the balcony. I looked down at the street where the lights reflected off the wet pavement and felt an invisible crack growing between us. I told myself I'd find a way to fix it, but deep down I knew it wouldn't be as simple as a technical drawing. I stepped back into the apartment, the steady whistle of wind on the windows like a reminder that the storm outside hadn't let up. I sank onto the sofa, gripping my phone tightly, trying to sort through the chaos in my mind. I thought about our parents. Would they change their minds? Would they reconsider? Did they feel even a shred of remorse for turning their daughter out into the wind? I decided to call Mom. The phone rang for a long time, each ring stretching the tension in my chest. Finally, her voice came through cold and measured like she was reading an official statement. "Harrison, it's late. What's this about?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, it's about Sophia. She's staying with me. I thought you and Dad should know what's happened." I recounted the story briefly, not wanting to prolong the pain. Nathan's affair, his demand for a divorce, and Sophia showing up at their house in the wind with her 2 babies only to be turned away. I paused, waiting for some hint of emotion from the other end of the line. Silence. Then Mom spoke, her voice sharp as the blade I'd known since childhood. "Sophia brought this on herself. Harrison, a proper wife doesn't let her husband walk away like that. I taught her how to keep a family together, but she didn't listen. I don't have a daughter who gets abandoned by her husband like that." I felt my blood surge, but I held it in. "Mom, she's your daughter. She needs help. Emma and Olivia are your grandchildren. Don't you see how wrong this is, kicking Sophia out in the middle of a storm?" A sigh came through the phone as if I were inconveniencing her. "Harrison, you don't understand. Our family has honor. What would the neighbors think if they saw a daughter abandoned by her husband, standing at our doorstep with 2 children? Your father and I can't have the whole neighborhood talking." I gripped the phone so tightly I thought it might break. "Honor." I nearly shouted, but caught myself when I heard Olivia stir in the living room. "You're talking about honor when you left your daughter standing in the wind with 2 6-month-old babies. Do you even hear yourself?" Don't be disrespectful. Dad's voice cut in heavy and stern, like when he scolded me for breaking the garage window as a kid. He must have been listening on speaker. The Carter family has no place for stains. Sophia chose her path. She has to face the consequences. You should be careful, Harrison. Don't let yourself get dragged into this mess. I stood frozen, unable to believe what I just heard. Dad, Sophia is my sister, your daughter. Don't you feel any responsibility? Our responsibility is to uphold the family's honor, Dad said, his voice hard as steel. If you want to help your sister, that's your choice. But don't expect us to get involved. The call ended with a cold beep. I stood there in the dim hallway, staring at the phone screen. I thought of Sophia, her lost expression when I found her under our parents' porch. I thought of Emma and Olivia, two innocent children branded as stains by their own grandparents. The wind outside kept blowing as if trying to soothe the rage burning in my chest. Over the next few months, the tension in the apartment grew thicker. Sophia started to recover, but she still relied heavily on me. I didn't blame her. Being a single mother to two infants wasn't easy, especially after being betrayed by her husband and disowned by our parents. But Lauren was different. Her comments grew sharper, like, "Are they going to stay here forever?" or, "I didn't sign up to live with your entire family." Harrison. I tried to explain that it was temporary, that Sophia would get back on her feet soon. But even I wasn't sure how long that would take. One evening, everything exploded. I was sitting on the sofa holding Olivia while Sophia bathed Emma. Lauren walked in, clutching a stack of papers, her eyes cold. "We need to talk," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. I set Olivia in her crib, stood up, and followed Lauren to the bedroom. She closed the door and turned to me. "Harrison, I can't do this anymore." "Do what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You know exactly what." Lauren snapped, her voice trembling with anger. "You spend all day on Sophia and the girls. I'm no longer your priority. I don't want to live in a house where I feel like an outsider." I wanted to argue, to say that she was still important to me. But the words wouldn't come. I knew she was partly right. I'd let Sophia and the girls consume my time and energy. But how could I abandon my sister? How could I leave her alone after everything she'd been through? "I want you to choose," Lauren said, her voice like a knife. "Me or Sophia, you can't have both." I stood there feeling the floor collapse beneath me. "Lauren," I whispered, "you can't ask me to do that." But she just shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "You just made your choice," she said, then turned and walked out of the room. The days that followed were heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Lauren began packing her things bit by bit. I tried to talk to convince her we could work it out, but she only looked at me with distant eyes. "You're a great brother, Harrison," she said one morning as she pulled her suitcase toward the door. "But I need a husband." I stood at the door watching Lauren walk away, her suitcase rolling down the hallway. The sound of the wheels echoed like the final rhythm of our marriage. When the door closed, I felt a void growing in my chest. But I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. I turned back to the living room where Sophia was holding Olivia, her eyes full of worry. "Harrison, what's going on?" she asked. I shook my head, not wanting to burden her further. "It's nothing," I said, sitting down beside her. "Everything will be okay." But this time, I wasn't sure I believed those words anymore. The days that followed were quieter in the apartment. But it was a heavy kind of quiet, like the lull before a new storm. Lauren was gone, leaving me with Sophia, Emma, Olivia, and an apartment now filled with voids I didn't know how to fill. I tried to keep everything steady, going to work, taking care of the girls, and making sure Sophia didn't notice the cracks in my heart. But every night, lying on the sofa, listening to the wind tap against the windows, I couldn't stop thinking about Lauren, her smile, and the plans we'd made for a future that had now dissolved. Sophia, though still fragile, began to regain a spark in her eyes. She no longer spent all day curled up on the sofa. Instead, she started doing small things, brewing coffee for me in the morning, folding clothes for Emma and Olivia, or softly humming as she rocked the girls to sleep. One evening, when I returned from a construction site, weary with the smell of concrete and dust clinging to my clothes, I found Sophia sitting at the kitchen table, an old notebook in front of her. She was writing, her pen moving swiftly across the page, her eyes focused as if she were rediscovering a part of herself. "What are you writing?" I asked, pulling up a chair across from her. Olivia was asleep in her crib, and Emma was playing with a stuffed animal on the rug. Sophia looked up a little embarrassed, then slid the notebook toward me. "Just some thoughts," she said softly. "I think I need to write them down so I don't forget what I've been through." I flipped through a few pages, reading her slanted handwriting. They weren't just random thoughts. Sophia wrote about that windy night standing huddled under our parents' porch clutching Emma and Olivia. She wrote about Nathan, how he shattered her world with his cold words. She wrote about me, how I drove over 12 hours to pick her up, becoming her only anchor when everything collapsed. My throat tightened as I read. "Sophia," I said, setting the notebook down. "This is really good." She smiled, a faint but genuine smile. "I don't know, Harrison. I just thought if I write it down, maybe I'll figure out who I am after all this." From that day on, the notebook became Sophia's companion. Every night after the girls were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table writing under the dim glow of a table lamp. Some nights she wrote until late, her eyes red, not from sadness, but from rediscovering herself page by page. I didn't say much, just quietly brewed coffee, set it beside her, and sat nearby reviewing blueprints or scrolling through news on my phone. I knew she needed space, and I wanted her to have it. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, Sophia called me back. "Harrison, can you read this?" She handed me a stack of papers much thicker than the original notebook. "I think I've finished a part of it. I want to know what you think." I sat down and flipped through the pages. It was Sophia's story from the day she met Nathan, through the joyful months of her pregnancy with Emma and Olivia, to the betrayal, the windy night, and her journey as a single mother. But what moved me most was how she wrote about me. She called me a lighthouse in the storm, the one who pulled her out of the darkness. I looked at her, trying to hide the tears welling in my eyes. "Sophia, it's really special. You should do something with it. Do something." She asked, frowning. "What do you mean, like, publish it?" I said, though I wasn't sure how realistic the idea was. "Your story. It could inspire others. People going through what you've been through." Sophia laughed, but it was a skeptical laugh. Who'd want to read about me, a single mom ditched by her husband and disowned by her family? "A lot of people," I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. "Because you're not just someone who was abandoned. You're someone who got back up." Those words seemed to hit Sophia. She went quiet, staring at the stack of papers, then nodded. "I'll think about it," she said. But I saw a small spark in her eyes, like a flame starting to catch. I didn't want to push her, but the idea of Sophia's book stayed with me. I started acting quietly. One lunch break at the construction site, I called Alex, an old college friend who now ran an independent publishing house in Chicago. Alex was always a dreamer, passionate about books and true stories. I told him briefly about Sophia, about the memoir she was writing, and asked if he'd be willing to take a look. "Send it over," Alex said, his voice excited. "If it's as good as you say, I'll consider it." I didn't tell Sophia about the call. I didn't want her to get her hopes up only to be disappointed. Instead, I encouraged her to keep writing a little each day. I bought more paper, pens, and even an old laptop for her to type on. Every time I saw her sitting at the screen, typing with absolute focus, a quiet pride swelled in my chest. The Sophia from before, the passionate girl always chasing stories, was coming back. Months passed, and Sophia's manuscript took shape. She titled it Shelter from the Storm. I read each chapter, fixed typos, and occasionally offered suggestions, though I knew I wasn't a writer. "Harrison, are you sure it's okay?" Sophia asked one night when the manuscript had grown to over 250 pages. "It's more than okay," I said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "It's you, Sophia. It's your story." Finally, I convinced her to send the manuscript to Alex. I still remember the day she hit send on the email, her hands trembling, her eyes a mix of excitement and fear. "What if they don't like it?" "Harrison," she asked. "Then you're still Sophia," I replied. "And you've done something most people wouldn't dare." "Tell your story." 2 weeks later, Alex called. I was at the construction site standing at the base of a bridge in progress when my phone rang. "Harrison, your sister's manuscript. It's really special," Alex said. "It's raw, emotional, and powerful. I want to publish it." I nearly dropped the phone. "Really?" I asked, my voice higher than usual. "Absolutely, but I need to meet Sophia to discuss the details. Can you arrange that evening?" I told Sophia. She sat frozen, clutching her coffee mug as if she couldn't believe her ears. "Harrison, are you serious? They want to publish my book?" "Absolutely," I said, smiling. Sophia threw her arms around me, tears in her eyes. Emma and Olivia, playing on the rug, looked up at us as if sensing the joy in the air. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Sophia met with Alex and his team, revising the manuscript, designing the cover, and planning the release. I stayed on the sidelines, supporting quietly, driving her to meetings, watching Emma and Olivia when she was busy, and making sure she had time to focus. I didn't want her to know I'd contacted Alex early on. I wanted this to be her victory, hers alone, the day Shelter from the Storm officially hit the shelves. I stood in the corner of a small Chicago bookstore, watching Sophia sign her first copies. She wore a simple green dress, her blonde hair tied up, but her eyes shone brightly, as if the fire within her had been reignited. Only a few dozen people showed up, mostly Alex's friends and some curious readers. Sophia was so nervous she dropped her pen twice, but when she started talking to the crowd, her smile warmed the entire room. I stood there holding Olivia in my arms, Emma clutching my finger, and felt a quiet pride swelling inside me. My sister, who had once stood shivering in the wind, was now standing under the lights, sharing her story. The book's initial sales were modest. I wasn't surprised. Publishing is a tough industry, and Chicago isn't New York. But one evening, as I was preparing a bottle for Olivia, Sophia burst into the kitchen holding up her phone, her face flushed with excitement. "Harrison, look at this," she nearly shouted. A reader, a single mother from New York City, had posted about the book on social media. "Shelter from the Storm isn't just a book. It's a flame for those who've been abandoned. Read it. You won't regret it." That post, like a spark, spread rapidly. Hundreds of shares turned into thousands. Women's groups online began discussing it, calling Sophia a quiet hero. Within weeks, the book sold tens of thousands of copies and made it onto a local newspaper's weekly bestseller list. I still remember the moment Sophia received an email from Alex announcing that a major publisher had offered to partner for a nationwide release. She sat at the kitchen table reading the email over and over as if she couldn't believe her eyes. "Harrison," she whispered. "Is this real?" I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "It's real, little sis. You did it." From there, everything felt like a dream. The book didn't stop at the US. A publisher in the UK offered to translate it for an international English edition, followed by France, Germany, and even Japan. I don't know how Sophia felt seeing her name on book covers in languages she couldn't read, but I noticed how she stood taller, smiled more. She was no longer the Sophia from that windy night. She was Sophia Carter, author, mother, and a symbol of women who had been hurt but refused to fall. With the book's success came invitations. First was a local talk show in Chicago, where Sophia sat under stage lights sharing her journey as a single mother. I sat in the audience holding Emma and Olivia, trying to keep them quiet as Sophia spoke. She was nervous at first, but when the audience clapped, I saw her relax. "I didn't do it alone," she said, her eyes finding me in the crowd. My brother Harrison pulled me out of the darkness. I bowed my head, pretending to fix Olivia's hair, but really, I was hiding the tears welling in my eyes. That talk show was just the beginning. A month later, Sophia was invited to a women's conference in New York City. She stood on stage before hundreds of women, telling her story with a sincerity that silenced the room. When she finished, the applause roared like thunder. I didn't go that time. I had to stay home with Emma and Olivia. But Sophia called me right after, her voice breaking with emotion. "Harrison." They gave me a standing ovation. They said I inspired them. I smiled through the phone, though I felt a hollow ache inside. "You deserve it, Sophia," I said. But when I hung up, I looked around the small apartment cluttered with bottles and baby toys, and wondered, what about me? I'd sacrificed my marriage, put Sophia and the girls above everything. I didn't regret it, but I couldn't deny that Sophia's brilliance, as radiant as it was, cast a long shadow over my life. One day, Alex called me, his voice brimming with excitement. "Harrison, we want to host a special event in Chicago, a big talk, and we want you and Sophia on stage together. Your story, your bond, your sacrifice is the heart of the book." I hesitated. "I'm not a speaker." "Alex, that's Sophia's thing." "But you're part of the story," Alex said. "People want to hear from you, Harrison. They want to know about the brother who did everything for his sister." I didn't want to do it, honestly. I didn't like the spotlight or speaking to crowds. But Sophia convinced me. "Harrison, please," she said, taking my hand. "I want people to know how amazing you are." So, I agreed. The event took place at a small theater in downtown Chicago with over 600 people in the audience. I stood backstage, hands sweating, watching Sophia step onto the stage, radiant in her familiar green dress. She told her story as she had done hundreds of times, but this time she paused and turned to me. "My brother Harrison saved me," she said, her voice choking. "He didn't just give me a home. He gave me the belief that I could stand again." The audience clapped, and I walked out, the stage lights blinding me, making me want to retreat backstage. But Sophia held my hand, and I stood there telling my story, not as a speaker, but as a brother. I talked about the windy night driving 12 hours to pick up Sophia and the difficult days that followed. "I'm not a hero," I said, my voice. "I'm just a brother doing what I had to do." When we finished, the audience stood, their applause echoing. I looked at Sophia, saw her smiling through tears, and felt that everything, the sacrifices, the pain, the sleepless nights, was worth it. We had healed together, not just for ourselves, but for the thousands of people listening to our story. The glow of Sophia's success seemed like it would last forever, but life, as I'd learned, never lacked storms. Just a few weeks after our joint talk in Chicago, a letter arrived, sent through the mail, sealed in a white envelope with my mother's rigid handwriting. As I opened it, an uneasy feeling settled in my gut. Inside was a short, cold letter from our parents, Robert and Margaret Carter. "Sophia," the letter read, "your book is an affront to the family's honor. You have publicly slandered us, causing the entire neighborhood to shun us. We demand that you withdraw the book from the market and issue a public apology. If not, we will take legal action." I read it over and over, feeling as though the blood in my veins had stopped flowing. Our parents, the ones who had turned Sophia away in the wind, now dared to threaten her. I clenched the letter in my hand, trying to suppress my anger, then called Sophia into the kitchen. "Read this," I said, handing her the letter. Sophia scanned the lines, her face shifting from shock to pain, and finally to a resolve I'd never seen before. "They want me to withdraw the book," she asked, her voice trembling but sharp. "After everything they've done, they disowned me. Harrison. They called Emma and Olivia stains, and now they want me to apologize." "What are you going to do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sophia folded the letter and set it on the table. "I'm not withdrawing the book. This is my story. Our story. I won't let them control me anymore." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "I'm with you no matter what happens," but I didn't expect our parents to go so far. A week later, we received a legal notice from a lawyer in New York City. Robert and Margaret Carter were officially suing Sophia for defamation of character. They argued that, while not named directly, Sophia's book portrayed them as cruel parents, causing their community to shun them. The lawsuit demanded the book's withdrawal, financial compensation, and a public apology. I was stunned. I knew our parents valued appearances, but suing their own daughter. I looked at Sophia, fearing she'd break, but she only clenched her fists, her eyes blazing. "They want to fight. Fine," she said. "I'm not backing down." News of the lawsuit spread quickly. A New York City newspaper ran a story with the headline, "Parents Sue Daughter for Daring to Tell the Truth." The article quoted passages from Sophia's book, particularly her description of the windy night when she was turned away at our parents' door. Social media erupted. Some criticized Sophia, saying she'd gone too far by airing family matters, but most, especially those who'd read her book, stood by her. "Sophia Carter is a brave mother." One post read, "She told the truth, and now her family wants to silence her." The post was shared thousands of times, turning the lawsuit into a national story. I tried to keep Sophia focused, but the pressure mounted. TV stations invited her for interviews, wanting her to talk about the lawsuit and our parents. Sophia declined most, saying simply, "I wrote the truth. I don't regret it." But I saw her starting to lose sleep, dark circles forming under her eyes as she held Emma and Olivia. I knew she was trying to stay strong, but the lawsuit was another knife cutting into old wounds. I didn't stay on the sidelines. I contacted Emily, an old lawyer friend who'd worked with Lauren and whom I trusted. Emily agreed to take the case after reading Sophia's book. "Her story is powerful, Harrison," Emily said over the phone. "I'll do everything to protect her." Emily began gathering evidence. She asked Sophia to recount every detail of that windy night. And I'll never forget the evening she sat with Sophia, taking notes as Sophia's voice trembled. Sophia described knocking on our parents' door, clutching Emma and Olivia, begging to be let in. She shared the text message our mother sent afterward. "Don't ever come back, Sophia." Emily uncovered security footage from a neighbor's house capturing Sophia standing in the wind, holding her two girls. The blurry image was undeniable proof. Emily also found an old voicemail from our father on Sophia's phone calling her a stain on the family in a call after that night. On the day of the trial, I sat beside Sophia in the courtroom, feeling like I was stepping into a construction site I couldn't control. Our parents sat across the room, Dad in a pristine suit, Mom with the rigid smile I recognized from old family photos. They didn't look at us, but I saw Dad's hands clenched tightly, and Mom kept smoothing her hair as if trying to maintain her perfect image. Their lawyer argued that Sophia's book had ruined their reputation, causing neighbors and friends to turn away. Miss Carter deliberately defamed her parents, the lawyer said sharply. She not only fabricated the truth, but exploited her story for profit. Emily stood calm but incisive. She presented the evidence, the text from Mom, the security footage, and Dad's voicemail. Each piece was like a hammer dismantling the other side's argument. When the footage played on the courtroom screen showing Sophia shivering in the wind with her babies, the room fell silent. I saw a few people wipe away tears. Sophia gripped my hand under the table, her breath shaky. When the judge asked Sophia to speak, she stood her voice clear despite a slight tremble. I didn't write the book to hurt anyone, she said. I wrote it to heal, to tell other women they're not alone. If the truth hurts, that's not my fault. The trial lasted 4 days, but to me it felt like 4 years. In the end, the judge ruled in Sophia's favor. The book did not defame anyone, as everything she wrote was true, backed by clear evidence. Our parents were ordered to pay legal fees. But what hurt the most was the media's backlash. Major outlets reported, Carter family loses lawsuit against daughter for trying to silence the truth. Social media branded our parents toxic, and the brownstone house in New York City, where I grew up, became the focus of public criticism. I didn't feel victorious. As we left the courtroom, I looked at Sophia, saw her holding Emma and Olivia tightly, but her eyes weren't joyful. Harrison, she whispered. I just wanted them to understand. I took her hand, saying nothing. No words could erase this pain. Our parents had chosen their pride over their daughter, and now they'd lost both. After the lawsuit with our parents, it seemed like life might finally settle into some semblance of peace. But I soon learned that storms never come alone. The success of Sophia's memoir, Shelter from the Storm, had propelled her to new heights, but it also brought unforeseen troubles. The next storm following the legal battle with our parents was Nathan Ellis, the ex-husband who had shattered Sophia's world. In the book, Sophia didn't name Nathan directly, but details like a New York City advertising creative director were unmistakable to anyone who knew them. Social media, with the speed of a wildfire, quickly uncovered his identity. A Twitter account posted, "Anyone else realize the man in Sophia Carter's book is Nathan Ellis, creative director at DNK Advertising?" The post included a photo of Nathan in a sleek suit, sporting his smug smile, and within hours it spread across forums. The fallout was swift, like a tsunami. Nathan was fired from his company that same week, citing behavior damaging to the brand's reputation. His new girlfriend, the younger colleague he'd left Sophia for, dumped him shortly after the scandal broke. Tabloids branded Nathan the coward who abandoned his family, and his image, once that of a successful man, was now tied to scathing online comments. I didn't follow social media much, but Sophia showed me a viral post. Nathan Ellis, the man who chose suits and a mistress over his wife and kids. Despicable. I felt no pity. He got what he deserved. But one morning as I was brewing coffee in the kitchen, Sophia walked in, clutching her phone, her face pale. "Harrison," she whispered. "Nathan just emailed me." I froze, looking at her. "What does he want?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. Sophia opened the email and read aloud. "Sophia, I know I messed up. I want to see Emma and Olivia. I want to apologize to you. Please give me a chance." She looked up, her eyes confused. "What do you think I don't know what to do." I gripped my coffee mug, trying to keep my voice calm. "You don't owe him anything. Sophia, he abandoned you and the girls. He's only crawling back now because he's backed into a corner." But Sophia, with her ever-soft heart, hesitated. Maybe he really regrets it," she said, her voice barely audible. "Emma and Olivia are his daughters. They deserve to know their father." I didn't want to argue, but I didn't trust Nathan. Men like him don't change after a few months of public shaming. I just nodded and said, Think it over carefully. Don't rush into anything. But inside, I was on high alert. Nathan didn't stop at the email. He started calling, texting, and one afternoon when I returned from a construction site, I found him standing outside our apartment, his coat soaked from Chicago's wind. He looked more haggard than I remembered. Hair disheveled, eyes shadowed, but that smug smile still lingered. "Harrison," he said, raising a hand as if to shake mine. "I just want to talk to Sophia." I crossed my arms, blocking the door. "She doesn't want to see you. Leave." "Nathan," he sighed, as if I were making things difficult for him. "Look, I know I screwed up, but I'm Emma and Olivia's father. I have a right to see them." "Rights," I snapped, anger surging. "You lost those when you ditched them for another woman. Get out of here before I call the cops." Nathan stepped back, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "You can't keep me from my kids forever, Harrison," he said, then turned and walked away. I stood there, my heart pounding, feeling like I just faced a wolf. I told Sophia about the encounter, and she grew anxious. "Harrison, what if Nathan really wants to see the girls? I don't want Emma and Olivia to grow up not knowing their father." I took her hand, keeping my voice gentle. "Sophia, he doesn't care about the girls. He's just using you, using your fame to salvage his image." After that confrontation, Nathan started showing up everywhere. At a book signing in New York City, he appeared in the crowd, standing in the front row, his eyes locked on Sophia. I was backstage holding Olivia when he stepped forward, raising a hand as if to speak. "Sophia," he called loud enough to silence the room. "I'm sorry. I was wrong to leave you and the kids. I just want a chance to make things right." The audience murmured. Some pulled out phones to record. Sophia froze on stage, her hand gripping her signing pen, her face pale. I wanted to rush out and drag him away, but Sophia raised a hand, signaling me to stop. "Nathan," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. "If you're truly sorry, you'll leave me and the kids alone. Don't turn this into a performance." The crowd applauded, but Nathan didn't leave immediately. He stood there staring at her, then lowered his head and walked out. The clip of the incident went viral. Some sympathized with Nathan, calling him a father seeking redemption, but most condemned him, accusing him of staging a publicity stunt to restore his reputation. Public opinion split, and Sophia became the center of heated debates. "I didn't want this, Harrison," she said one night, burying her face in her hands. "I just want to protect Emma and Olivia." But Nathan didn't stop. He began sending gifts to Emma and Olivia's preschool, teddy bears, coloring books, and handwritten notes saying, "I love you." The teachers called Sophia, concerned about the girls' safety. Sophia grew terrified, checking the windows every night, sleeping with Emma and Olivia in her arms instead of their cribs. My anger swelled. Nathan wasn't just harassing Sophia. He was threatening the peace we'd fought to build. "Enough," I said one morning after Sophia received another text from Nathan. "We need to end this." I contacted Emily, the lawyer who'd helped us in the lawsuit against our parents. Emily agreed to draft a restraining order citing Nathan's harassment and the psychological harm it was causing Sophia and the girls. We gathered evidence, emails, texts, the clip from the book signing, and reports from the preschool about the unsolicited gifts. Emily filed the petition requesting a 4-year restraining order barring Nathan from contacting Sophia, Emma, or Olivia, and mandating that he undergo psychological counseling and a parenting responsibility program. On the court date, I sat beside Sophia, feeling like we were entering another battle. Nathan appeared dressed in a suit, but no longer polished. He looked at Sophia, his eyes pleading, but she didn't respond. Emily presented the evidence, emphasizing that Nathan's actions weren't remorse, but dangerous obsession. Nathan's lawyer argued he was only trying to reconnect with his children, but the judge wasn't swayed. The ruling came after 3 hours. Nathan was barred from contacting Sophia, Emma, or Olivia for 4 years. He was ordered to attend mandatory counseling and complete a parenting responsibility program before he could petition to revisit his visitation rights. As the judge's gavel fell, Sophia let out a shaky breath, gripping my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Nathan left the courtroom without looking at us. I don't know if he'll ever change, but I know that for the next 4 years, Sophia and the girls will be safe. After the lawsuit with Nathan, our lives slowly found a rhythm again, though the scars remained. Sophia, Emma, Olivia, and I returned to the small apartment where the sound of wind tapping on the windows felt like an old friend. But now, the apartment no longer carried the heavy weight it once did. There was a lightness, as if we had weathered the biggest storms and finally glimpsed the light. Sophia didn't stop. She began writing a sequel to Shelter from the Storm, a new memoir titled Freedom is When You No Longer Need for Forgiveness. This book wasn't just about her journey as a single mother. It chronicled the battles she'd faced with Nathan, with our parents, and with the doubts within herself. She wrote about me, about how I stood by her through every tempest, and about Emma and Olivia, 2 little girls growing up surrounded by the love of a community larger than their biological family. I stayed on the sidelines, as was my habit. I read her drafts, offered a few suggestions, and looked after Emma and Olivia when she was busy. But this time, Sophia didn't need my nudging. She had found her own strength. When her second book was released, it quickly became a resounding success, hitting bestseller lists within weeks. Reviews called it a manifesto of resilience, and Sophia was invited to more events, from women's conferences to packed book signings. Emma and Olivia, now nearly 4 years old, were growing up healthy and radiant. They loved running around in the park near our home, where I'd push them on the swings, laughing as Olivia tried to catch a butterfly, or as Emma scribbled colorful chalk drawings on the pavement. The Chicago community adored them, calling them Sophia's little girls. Every time I dropped them off at preschool, I saw teachers and parents looking at them with affection, as if they belonged to the whole neighborhood. I found my own peace, too. Each morning I brewed coffee, read books with Emma and Olivia, or tended to the small garden on the balcony where I grew mint and daisies. My life was no longer a perfect technical drawing, but it was full in ways I hadn't expected. I didn't contact Lauren anymore, though sometimes I wondered if she was happy. But I had no regrets. Sophia, Emma, and Olivia were my family, and I'd made the right choice. At one of Sophia's book signings in Chicago, I stood in the corner watching her chat with readers. She was radiant, confident, as if her glow had become a part of her. A young woman, maybe in her early 20s, approached and hugged Sophia tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You saved my life," she said, her voice choked. "Your book helped me stand up after my family disowned me." Sophia hugged her back, smiling gently. "It wasn't me," she said, her eyes finding me in the crowd. "It was my brother." I looked down, pretending to adjust my shirt, but my heart tightened. I didn't need the spotlight or the praise. But in that moment, as Sophia looked at me with gratitude, I knew every sacrifice I'd made was worth it. When the signing ended, we returned to the apartment, Emma and Olivia dozing on my shoulders. Sophia sat beside me on the sofa, her head resting on my shoulder like when we were kids. "Harrison," she whispered, "thank you for everything." I smiled, ruffling her hair. "Go to sleep, little sis. Tomorrow's a new day." Outside, the Chicago wind still blew, but this time, it didn't feel sad. It was a reminder that no matter how many storms came, we had learned to stand strong together.